The city of Istanbul glowed that evening, its streets alive with the golden hue of lamps and the distant echo of wedding drums. Miriam Kaya clutched the edge of her modest shawl as she stepped out of the taxi. Her heart was filled with a blend of nervousness and excitement. It was the day she had dreamt of for years, the wedding of her only son, Amir. The venue stood like a palace, draped in silken banners and bathed in glittering lights. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and guests dressed in gowns and tailored suits streamed through the grand entrance. Miriam paused for a moment, her shoes worn but polished, her dress simple yet carefully ironed. She whispered to herself, steadying her breath. Inside, the sound of violins and traditional Turkish instruments filled the hall. The marble floor shone under chandeliers, and everywhere she looked there were faces unfamiliar to her, speaking with the air of wealth and comfort. Miriam felt her chest tighten as she realized how different she appeared among them. Yet she reminded herself that she was not here to compare appearances. She was here for her son. She searched the crowd, her eyes finally falling on Amir. He stood tall in his dark suit, his arm proudly linked with his bride, Layla, who shimmered in a gown that seemed almost too radiant to belong to reality. The young couple greeted guests with smiles, their movements graceful, like figures carved into the moment. Miriam's heart swelled, tears welling at the corners of her eyes. She had raised him alone, through hardship and sacrifice, and now he was beginning his new life. She walked forward with a trembling smile, eager to embrace him, to share in this joy. But as she reached him, Amir's expression shifted. His smile faltered for the briefest second, and his eyes scanned her from head to toe. With a low voice, one meant only for her ears, he uttered words that froze her blood. "You look too poor to be here." The music carried on, laughter bubbled around them, and no one else heard. Yet those words shattered the air inside her chest, leaving her standing motionless amidst the grandeur of her son's celebration. Miriam's heart pounded, as though the chandeliers above might crash down on her shoulders. The words of her son echoed endlessly. She swallowed hard, forcing a faint smile, as if nothing had happened. Guests brushed past her with greetings, their perfume heavy in the air, their jewelry catching the light like flames. She drifted into the crowd, her hands trembling. Everywhere she turned, whispers seemed to follow. Perhaps they were only the idle chatter of strangers, but to her ears, they felt sharper, directed. She could sense the divide between herself and the glittering world surrounding her. The laughter seemed to mock her simple dress, her modest shoes, her entire life of struggle. Layla's family dominated the evening. They were powerful merchants, known throughout Istanbul for their empire of trade. Men in dark tailored suits stood in corners, talking in hushed tones, while women glittered like queens in gowns embroidered with gold. They welcomed each guest with calculated smiles. To them, Miriam was invisible, a shadow on the edge of their empire. She moved towards a quiet corner, needing air. But the silence, there was no comfort. She overheard two women near the refreshment table, speaking in Turkish, their voices sharp with disdain. "Who is that woman? She looks as though she wandered in from the streets." "She is his mother," the other replied with a chuckle. "I heard she is nothing. A poor widow from the old neighborhood." The sting of their words seared through Miriam's chest. She bit the inside of her cheek to stop herself from crying. She had expected to feel proud tonight, to see her son rise above the struggles they had endured together. Instead, she was drowning in humiliation, cast aside in the very place where she should have belonged. She turned her gaze back to Amir. He was laughing now, his arm tightly wrapped around his bride. His eyes never once searched for her in the crowd. It was as though she had already been erased. And yet, a small voice inside whispered to her. Something felt wrong. It was not only her son's cruel words or the disdain of strangers. It was the atmosphere itself, the way people glanced at one another, the way Layla's family seemed too careful, too controlled. It was a celebration, but beneath the surface, there was something hidden, something dangerous. The night pressed on with music and speeches, yet Miriam could not shake the heavy weight in her chest. She lingered near the back of the hall, watching carefully, her eyes sharper now, no longer blurred by pride or tears. She noticed things she had not at first. Amir's smile seemed rehearsed, stretched too wide at times, fading too quickly at others. Layla leaned close to whisper in his ear more often than a bride usually would. Her family's eyes followed them constantly, measuring every gesture, every glance, as though Amir was a prized possession they were determined to keep in line. Miriam moved closer to the buffet table, pretending to study the trays of food. From there, she could observe without drawing attention. She saw Amir slip his hand into his pocket several times, pulling out his phone, glancing at the screen with a frown, then tucking it back quickly before anyone noticed. Except she noticed. A man she had not seen before approached Layla's father. Tall, stern, with a scar across his jaw, he whispered something into the older man's ear. The patriarch's smile faltered, and he gave the faintest nod before turning away, his eyes scanning the hall with suspicion. Miriam felt a shiver crawl down her spine. This was no ordinary wedding. The lavishness, the over-attentive guards disguised as waiters, the hushed exchanges, it all felt like a stage, a performance hiding something darker. Her thoughts were broken when a young waiter passed by, his tray heavy with glasses. He stumbled slightly near her, and under his breath, almost too quiet to hear, he muttered in Turkish, "Be careful. Not all here is as it seems." She froze. By the time she turned to question him, he had already disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by music and laughter. Miriam's pulse quickened. Her humiliation had been sharp enough, but now it was laced with dread. She realized she was standing at the edge of a secret she had not been meant to discover. And whatever it was, it involved her son. Miriam tried to steady her breathing, though her pulse raced faster with every passing moment. She could not erase the waiter's words. The warning clung to her like a shadow. She wanted to believe the night was nothing more than her son's wedding, that her humiliation was only a wound to her pride. Yet deep within, she felt the truth scratching to be heard. She searched for Amir again. He was surrounded by Layla's relatives, their faces stern beneath their painted smiles. Amir laughed when prompted, drank when offered a glass, and moved with the rhythm of the evening, but there was tension in the set of his shoulders. Miriam recognized it, for she had raised him. She had seen that look in his eyes when he was hiding something as a boy. She remembered the countless nights she had sacrificed to provide for him, the hunger she endured so he could eat, the long hours spent cleaning houses of wealthier families. She thought those sacrifices had brought him here, to happiness. But tonight, she questioned if the wealth surrounding him was his own, or something more dangerous. A man brushed past her, his cologne sharp, his eyes cold. He carried a leather folder, clasped tightly against his chest, and walked straight towards Layla's father. Their exchange was brief, deliberate, then the folder vanished beneath the tablecloth at the head table. No one else seemed to notice, but Miriam's eyes locked on it. The music swelled again, dancers spinning in bright costumes across the marble floor. Applause filled the hall, drowning out the unease in her heart. Yet the more she tried to convince herself she was imagining it, the stronger the feeling grew. Something was unfolding before her eyes, hidden beneath the silks and smiles. And her son was part of it. Later in the evening, when the air grew thick with wine and the guests swayed with laughter, Miriam found herself close enough to overhear a conversation. She lingered near a pillar, half hidden in the shadows, as Layla's mother and uncle whispered. "He must sign tonight," the uncle muttered. "If he delays, the partners will withdraw. We cannot afford hesitation." Layla's mother pursed her lips. "He will sign. Layla has convinced him. By morning, Amir will be bound, and his mother will no longer matter." The words struck Miriam like a dagger. Bound. No longer matter. She pressed her hand to her chest, her breath shallow. They were not speaking of marriage vows. They were speaking of business, of something far larger, something that placed Amir in the center of their plans. Miriam backed away, but the hem of her dress caught the leg of a chair. It scraped against the marble floor, loud enough to draw a glance from Layla's uncle. His eyes, dark and suspicious, swept the hall. For one tense second, They landed on her. But then another burst of applause erupted as the dancers bowed, and his attention shifted. Miriam slipped into the crowd, her palms slick with sweat. She wanted to run to Amir, to warn him, but how could she? He had already humiliated her, already pushed her aside as if she were dirt beneath his shoes. Would he even listen if she spoke? Still, she could not abandon him. He was her son, and no matter how cruel his words, his life was tangled in something dangerous. She had to find a way to uncover the truth. As the celebration reached its height, Miriam moved quietly through the hall, pretending to admire the decorations. Yet her eyes were fixed on the head table, where the leather folder had been hidden earlier. The opportunity came when Layla's family rose for a toast, drawing the attention of the guests. With the crowd's gaze lifted towards the clinking glasses, Miriam slipped closer. Her fingers trembled as she reached beneath the tablecloth. For a moment, she touched nothing but wood and fabric. Then her hand brushed the edge of leather. She pulled the folder out only an inch before a voice cut through the noise. "What are you doing here?" She froze. It was the scarred man, his gaze sharp, his body blocking the light. He looked down at her hand on the folder, then back into her face. The room spun, yet somehow she found her voice. "I was looking for my seat," she whispered, her throat dry. He studied her for a long moment, then leaned in close enough that she could smell the bitterness of his breath. "Stay in your place. This is not your world." He took the folder and slid it away, vanishing into the crowd once more. Miriam's knees weakened, and she steadied herself against the table. She had failed to uncover the papers, but she had confirmed her fear. Something was happening tonight, something secret, and it was dangerous enough to be guarded like treasure. She could no longer hold her silence. She found Amir alone for the first time that evening, near the balcony overlooking the Bosphorus. He was scrolling his phone again, his face tight with unease. "Amir," she said, her voice trembling yet firm. He looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Mother, not now. Go back inside." She stepped closer. "I know something is happening. I heard them. They are making you sign something, binding you. Do you understand what you are stepping into?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, she saw the boy he used to be, the boy who once confessed every fear to her. But now he looked away. "It is not your concern. This is my life now." "Your life," she hissed softly. "Or theirs. You belong to them already. Can you not see it?" His hand clenched around the phone. "Enough. You are embarrassing me again. Leave it." Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to retreat. "I lost everything to raise you, Amir. Do not let them take what little we have left." He turned, ready to walk away, but for the briefest instant, his mask slipped. Fear glimmered in his eyes. And then he was gone, swallowed once more by the music and lights. The hour grew late, and many guests began to drift home. Yet Layla's family remained, gathered tightly around Amir near the head table. Miriam stayed hidden in the shadows, her body tense. The scarred man returned, carrying another folder. This one was opened across the table, pages spread out, a pen placed neatly on top. Amir stood before it, his face pale under the chandeliers. Layla whispered something into his ear, her hand on his arm, guiding him forward. Her father watched with hawk-like eyes, his hand tapping impatiently against his glass. Miriam's breath caught. She knew this was the moment. Whatever those papers contained, Amir was about to be bound to them. Bound beyond escape. She moved, weaving through the thinning crowd until she was close enough to see. The papers bore signatures already, but the final space was blank, waiting for Amir's name. The air thickened as he reached for the pen. At that instant, the same young waiter appeared again. He passed behind Miriam, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "If he signs, he is lost. Stop him, or you will lose him forever." Her hands shook violently, but her resolve hardened. She would not stand by. Miriam surged forward just as Amir lifted the pen. The hall fell silent in shock as her voice rang out. "Stop. Do not sign." Every eye turned toward her. Layla's family stiffened, their smiles dropping like masks. Amir froze, his face flushed with fury and shame. "Mama, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice cutting through clenched teeth. "You cannot do this," she cried. "They are using you. This is not marriage. This is a trap." The scarred man stepped forward, his hand reaching for her arm, but Miriam pulled away. She snatched the paper from the table and held it high. Gasps echoed through the room as the words became visible. It was not a marriage document at all. It was a contract, a transfer of assets, binding Amir's name to debts and obligations that were not his own. A scheme to secure wealth and power for Layla's family at the cost of her son's future. Amir's face drained of color. Layla reached for him, but he recoiled, his eyes locked on the truth in front of him. The hall erupted in shouts, the perfect facade shattered. Chaos filled the ballroom. Guests hurried towards the exits, whispers turning into cries of scandal. Layla's family tried to seize the papers, but Amir stood frozen, his world collapsing. Miriam clutched the document against her chest, her voice breaking. "You tried to make me small, Amir. You told me I was too poor to belong here. But tonight, I have saved you from losing everything." For the first time, Amir looked at her not with disdain, but with fear and regret. He reached for her, his voice trembling. "Mama." But the scarred man lunged forward, fury burning in his eyes. Before he could snatch the papers, Amir blocked him, shoving him back with a force that sent the man crashing into a chair. The hall froze in shock. Layla screamed, her perfect image shattering, her family scrambling to regain control. But the damage was done. The contract was exposed, their deceit unveiled in front of witnesses who would not forget. Amir stood beside his mother at last, though his hands shook, his face pale. He had chosen to stand with her, though the cost of that choice was yet to be seen. Miriam's chest heaved, her heart breaking and healing all at once. The night had begun with humiliation, but it ended with truth laid bare. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. The bond between mother and son had been tested in fire, and it would never be the same again.